The night was dark, and the club was packed. Flashing lights and the hum of the crowd filled the air. On stage, a man with slick, black hair and a white suit strutted with the confident swagger of a legend. He was Jimmy Angel, and he was about to change everything. Jimmy wasn't just any performer. He was a man who had spent decades impersonating Elvis Presley, and he did it so well that even the most die-hard fans couldn't tell the difference. But this night was different. This night, Jimmy was more than an impersonator. He was a legend in his own right. It all started with a phone call from a woman named Rona Barrett. She was a columnist for Hedda Hopper, one of the biggest names in Hollywood. Rona had a plan. She wanted Jimmy to look and sound just like Elvis. It was a bold idea, and Jimmy was skeptical, but Rona was persuasive. She told him it could be his big break, so Jimmy agreed. For the next few years, Jimmy transformed himself. He dyed his hair, practiced Elvis's moves, and even wrote songs that sounded just like the King's. It wasn't easy, but it paid off. Jimmy started recording covers of Elvis's hits, and they were a sensation. People loved him, and he loved the attention. For 18 years, no one said no to Jimmy Angel, but it wasn't just about the fame. Jimmy had a deep connection to Elvis. He wrote songs about Elvis and Marilyn Monroe, and he even claimed to have known Elvis's old producer, Otis Blackwell. Otis had written some of Elvis's biggest hits, like Don't Be Cruel and All Shook Up. Jimmy said that Otis once told him a story about a friend named Louie, who refused to write a song for Elvis because he thought Elvis would take credit for it. Louie missed out, but Otis made millions. Jimmy didn't just sing like Elvis, he felt like him. He loved the music, the attention, and the chicks. He did what Colonel Parker, Elvis's manager, told him. You do the singing, I do the business. It was a simple formula, but it worked. Jimmy never objected to singing like Elvis, and neither did Elvis. As Jimmy got older, he started to reflect on his life. He was 74, and he still wrote his little songs about Elvis. He remembered the days when he was mobbed by fans, and he knew that, in his own way, he was keeping Elvis's memory alive. But he never claimed to be Elvis. He was just a man who loved the music and the man who made it. The fans, like Vicky Sessler, adored Jimmy. For Vicky, even hearing an impersonator was enough because it made her feel like Elvis was still with them. She said, he saturates your whole body with love. It was a powerful feeling, and Jimmy knew it. He understood that impersonators weren't just copycats. They were keepers of a legacy. But not everyone was a fan. Ronnie McDowell, another impersonator, had his own story. He recorded 37 Elvis songs for a Kurt Russell film about Presley's life. Ronnie didn't want to sing like Elvis at first, but he was persuaded to try it. It worked, and he became a star in his own right. Ronnie didn't like to be called an impersonator. He saw himself as a performer who could do more than just mimic Elvis. He was equally passionate about Al Jolson, and even noted that Presley's version of Are You Lonesome Tonight had the same arrangement as Jolson's. The world of Elvis impersonators was complex. Some people believed that Elvis never died in 1977. They said it was a conspiracy, a way to escape the fame. Ronnie McDowell, however, dismissed these theories as stupid. He knew Elvis was the happiest man on stage, and he couldn't have faked his death. For Ronnie, Elvis's legacy was enough. But the stories and anecdotes about Elvis kept coming. Eddie Hood, who was close to Elvis, said that to understand him, you had to delve deep. He was anxious, even in his own rooms, and he craved attention. His fans and entourage gave him that. He took care of people, and he was driven by a desire to make them happy. Eddie said, "The more I go into it, I want you to roll down a window, put on your blue suede shoes, let down your hair, and go down memory lane." Hollywood was a big part of Elvis's life. He built houses there, and he made movies. In films like King Creole, he showed that he could be a good actor. Walter Matthau, who starred with Elvis, was impressed by his talent. Matthau said he could have been a fine actor, but the Colonel had other plans. He wanted Elvis to be a star, not just an actor. The movies became a way to promote Elvis's music and keep his fans engaged. Hollywood was a place where Elvis could be both a singer and an actor, but it was also a place where he felt the pressure of fame. He wanted to be more than just a star in a jumpsuit. He wanted to be an artist, but the system often worked against him. Producers and directors wanted to make Elvis movies, not serious films. Norman Taurog, who directed several of Elvis's movies, said, "Jack up the hat and run another Elvis under it." It was a harsh criticism of the industry that often reduced Elvis to a caricature. Despite the challenges, Elvis met some of the most beautiful women in America in Hollywood. He also found a new interest in Judaism, a religion that some believed he had connections to. Larry Geller, a hairdresser turned guru, became one of Elvis's closest friends. Geller's life was changed when he met Elvis in 1957. He was just a teenager then, but he never forgot the moment he saw Elvis. "He was from another planet, glowing from within," Geller said. Geller became Elvis's personal hairdresser and confidant. He helped Elvis navigate the complexities of fame and provided a different perspective on life. Geller said, "He still touches millions of lives around the world. His music, the force of his personality, he is more than a legend." As the night at the club came to an end, Jimmy Angel took a deep breath. He had done it again. He had brought Elvis back to life, if only for a moment. For the fans, it was enough. For Jimmy, it was a way to keep the memory of the king alive. And for Elvis, it was a legacy that would never die. Larry Geller had just landed a job as Elvis Presley's personal hairdresser. One day, while styling Elvis's hair for a movie called Roustabout with Barbara Stanwyck, Larry found himself in a deep conversation with the king of rock and roll. As he blow-dried Elvis's iconic locks, the singer looked at him in the mirror and asked, "Larry, who are you? What are you into?" Larry didn't expect such a question. He was used to keeping his mouth shut and respecting the privacy of the stars he worked with. But something about Elvis's genuine curiosity made him open up. He told Elvis that the most important thing in life was understanding the meaning of existence. "Is there really a God? Do we have a purpose in life? I have to find out, Elvis," Larry said. Elvis's eyes lit up. "You have no idea how much I need to hear what you have to say." "Please, Larry, keep talking," he responded, and so the conversation continued for hours. Elvis talked about his childhood in Tupelo, the struggles his family faced, and the sudden rise to fame. He shared his thoughts on spirituality and his belief that he was chosen for a reason. "There has to be a reason why I'm Elvis and why I have what I have," he said. Larry noticed that while he was cutting Elvis's hair, the singer's mind was probing deeper questions. The hair was important, but it was the conversation that mattered more. Elvis was a voracious reader and an avid conversationalist, always curious about the world around him. He read books on philosophy, religion, and even science. Larry would often bring books for Elvis to read, like The Impersonal Life, which Elvis later shared with others. Their friendship grew stronger over time. Larry became more than just a hairdresser. He was a confidant and a philosopher. They talked about everything: books, girls, and God. Elvis was always eager to learn and explore new ideas. He had a library filled with hundreds of books, and he read every day. When they went on tour, Elvis would bring 2 huge suitcases full of books with him. In 1965, Elvis was the highest-paid actor in Hollywood, and the Beatles wanted to meet him. Larry was styling Elvis's hair when he heard the news. Elvis became quiet and thoughtful. "I know exactly what these guys are going through," he said. When the Beatles arrived at Graceland, they were in awe of Elvis. They sat in a semicircle at his feet, silent for a few moments until Elvis broke the ice with a joke. The group played music together, and it was a magical night. Elvis played his Martin guitar, John Lennon played another guitar, and Paul McCartney picked up a bass. But the moment was lost because no one turned on a tape recorder, and Colonel Parker didn't allow any photos to be taken. Later, George Harrison was seen under a tree, smoking a joint. Elvis was impressed by the Beatles, but he was curious about their teeth. "I really like those guys, but I don't understand their teeth," he told Larry. Despite the rumors, Larry insists that Elvis was not prejudiced. He had many Jewish friends, and even wore a Star of David alongside his Christian cross. Larry believes Elvis had Jewish ancestry, and was deeply moved by the Holocaust. One night in Baltimore, Elvis was watching a PBS film about the Holocaust. He pounded his fist on the table and shouted, "How did this happen?" He was deeply affected by the pain and suffering depicted in the film. Elvis's transformation was noticed by many, including the director Norman Taurog. Taurog told Elvis, "I've been watching you. Whatever is happening in your life, keep it up. Your potential will explode." Elvis was proud of this recognition and decided to create a meditation garden at Graceland. Meditation became a significant part of Elvis's life. One evening, while driving through the Arizona desert, Elvis saw a cloud that he believed was a sign from God. It was in the shape of Joseph Stalin, and Elvis felt a bolt of light fill his body with love. He told Larry, "Now I know I'm not a believer, I'm a knower." Elvis's spiritual journey led him to consider becoming a monk. He wanted to show people that there was more to him than what they saw on the screen. Larry also noticed that Elvis's wife, Priscilla, was a positive influence on his health. She encouraged him to eat better and exercise. However, Larry believes she was jealous of his deep conversations with Elvis and didn't like him reading books. Despite his many achievements, Elvis was surrounded by a complex web of people, some of whom were not always looking out for his best interest. Larry and Elvis's father were the only ones who knew his true plans. Elvis was a genius, but he was also a flawed human being. His struggles with prescription drugs and poor diet were well known, but Larry believes that the core of Elvis's being was his spiritual journey and his quest for meaning. Elvis's life was a blend of fame, fortune, and a deep, unrelenting search for the answers to life's biggest questions. Larry Geller was there to witness it all, and their friendship remains a testament to the complexity and depth of the king of rock and roll. Sam Thompson had a different take on Elvis Presley's life. While he agreed that the food at Graceland was great, he never saw Elvis eat his famous banana and peanut butter sandwiches. Sam believed Elvis's prescription drug habit contributed to the breakup between Elvis's sister Linda and her employer. Sam even saw Elvis taking the pills and tried to talk to him about it, but Elvis threatened to fire him, saying the pills were more important than his job. According to Sam, Elvis knew he was taking something dangerous, but tried to convince himself otherwise. Ironically, Elvis was tough on drug use. He even had a badge to show his stance against drugs, but the real high for Elvis was the stage. Sam Geller, a close friend, said, "Most people care about his music." However, by the early 1970s, Elvis's music was facing a downturn. Record sales were dropping, and it was clear something needed to change. One night at Graceland, Elvis and his team were discussing the problem over dinner. Elvis's producer mentioned that they couldn't get their favorite drummer, Hal Blaine, or the best recording studios. The songwriters were bringing in mediocre songs, and Elvis's friend George Klein was frustrated. He saw his chance to speak up and told Elvis, "You're a superstar and these guys are giving you crap. You deserve the best." Surprisingly, Elvis agreed and decided to record hit songs. This led to the creation of Suspicious Minds and In the Ghetto, which became huge hits. However, there was a significant missed opportunity in Elvis's career. Barbra Streisand wanted Elvis to co-star with her in the movie A Star is Born. She pushed hard for him, but Elvis's manager, Colonel Tom Parker, kept saying no. Some people, like George Klein, believe this was one of Parker's biggest mistakes. Parker demanded top billing for Elvis, which Streisand wouldn't accept. Others, like Sonny West, say Elvis himself wanted out of the project and made impossible demands. Despite the differing opinions, many felt this was a lost chance for Elvis to become a major movie star. The film could have been a triumph, or it could have been a flop. But the opportunity never came, and Elvis missed out. In Hollywood, Elvis worked hard, and was respected by those around him. Walter Scharf, the musical director for several of Elvis's films, said Elvis was cooperative and respectful. Scharf taught Elvis about the music business, and Elvis taught Scharf about rock and roll. Scharf noticed that Elvis worked harder than many other singers, and was always willing to re-record songs to get them right. However, things were different when Colonel Parker was around. Parker seemed to have a hypnotic effect on Elvis, and the quality of the recordings would often suffer. Elvis's life in Hollywood was not just about work. He formed strong connections with the people he worked with, especially the women. Celeste Yarnall, an actress who worked with Elvis on Live a Little, Love a Little, recalled their first meeting. She was nervous, but Elvis put her at ease with a warm hug. They became good friends, and she felt a strong spiritual connection with him. Elvis loved women who were funny and outgoing, and he could be very gentle and sensitive with them. Celeste remembered his beautiful eyes, his kind nature, and his curiosity. He loved to read and explore spiritual topics, even though Colonel Parker sometimes confiscated his books. Elvis also talked about his personal life with Celeste. He was overwhelmed by fatherhood when his daughter Lisa Marie was born. He felt like a stranger in his own home and was afraid to sing because it might wake the baby. Despite his fame, Elvis often wondered why he was chosen for such a life. He explored spiritual ideas and read books like Chariots of the Gods by Erich von Däniken. On set, Elvis would jam with the crew, singing everything from Mario Lanza to country and light opera. He was a talented musician who could play many instruments. Elvis's time in Hollywood was a mix of success and missed opportunities. He remained a beloved figure, but the questions about what could have been will always linger. The woman who told the story was amazed by how Elvis Presley could completely transform when he sang. When he hit those operatic areas, he didn't sound like himself at all. He sounded like one of the great tenors, she said. And he did it right there on set, surrounded by electricians and technicians, all busy with their work. The crew treated him like royalty, but those close to him saw him as just another member of the family. He would climb up on a makeshift bandstand and perform, play an instrument. He could sing bass baritone with a 3.5 octave range, she added. Elvis had a way of charming everyone on set. They admired him almost as much as she did. If you couldn't get along with Elvis, you wouldn't have been hired to work on his set, she explained, but then there was the kissing scene. It was the first scene in the film, and it was intense. I lit for this kiss. It was quite nice, really, she said with a smile. Film was based on a book called Kiss My Firm But Pliant Lips. She laughed at the title, agreeing that it wasn't one to be taken lightly. The scene required a lot of rehearsal. She and Elvis would practice and practice, and then do one take. He had dark makeup, and I was very fair. The makeup artists were constantly cleaning each other's makeup off. I spent the whole morning kissing Elvis, she recalled. It was nearing lunchtime, and they were in the middle of a passionate kiss when the director called. Cut. Let's break for lunch. Cast 1 hour, crew half hour. But Elvis didn't stop. The arc lights were being shut off, the set was getting dark, and Elvis was still kissing her. Norman Torog was calling, "Okay, Elvis, lunchtime. Okay, Elvis, stop kissing." And finally he shouted, "For God's sake, we have to feed her." He let me go and we went to lunch. Even after all that, the kissing continued after lunch. Our friendship lasted during the filming, and there was a later attempt to get back together. But our lives had some complexities that made it impossible. I carry with me today the profound feeling of having been a friend of Elvis, she said. Elvis had perfect pitch and an incredible memory for the script. It wasn't the script of our future life that he remembered, though, she added with a hint of sadness. His hectic work schedule, especially with the comeback special, made it difficult for him to focus on anything else. He was very nervous about it. I told him they'd love him. I said the same thing when he asked if they would remember him and like his music. Elvis was also deeply concerned about what was happening in America and the world. During Martin Luther King Jr.'s funeral, he asked her to join him in his dressing room. He said if he couldn't be there in person, he was going to sing, and he did. He sang Amazing Grace in his dressing room, and it was a very powerful experience, she shared. When asked about Elvis's attitude toward filmmaking, she said it was a love-hate relationship. He was a brilliant actor, but his talent was mostly untapped, she explained. She believed that if he had done A Star is Born, there was an Academy Award on the horizon for him. He enjoyed making Live a Little, Love a Little. It was a romantic comedy that showed a different side of himself, and he really enjoyed it, she added. Susanna Lee, who co-starred with him in Paradise Hawaiian Style, saw a different side of Elvis. He could be petulant, not always the nice, easygoing, polite star. But on set, he was a thoroughly nice guy. He loved making movies, even the ones that weren't great. He worked hard to make them watchable, she said. The producer, Hal Wallis, was a father figure on set. He saw the star in everyone and respected Elvis. He wanted him to make better films, Susanna recalled. Wallis knew how to deal with Colonel Tom Parker, Elvis's manager. Hal said he just had to deal with it. The Colonel was a gambler, and he was all about the money. When the Colonel walked onto the set, he could be harsh. He said I looked dreadful, Susanna remembered. Elvis said, I'll have him off the set. Whether it actually happened, I'm not sure, but the message got through. Elvis's generosity was evident. He once sketched a design for a sapphire and diamond brooch for me. He wanted it to be perfect, she said. She also believed Elvis's fan base was wider than most people imagine. I met Queen Elizabeth II at the premiere of Born Free, and she asked all about Elvis. I told him he could be invited to the palace, but the Colonel intercepted the invitation. Music was a crucial part of Elvis's films, but the screenplay writers had to work around it. We never decided where to place the songs. We wrote the script and then found places for the music, Michael Hoey explained. Elvis was a terrific light comedian, but he had trouble with subtext. Given time, he could have improved. Elvis's relationship with the Colonel was tense. There were two Elvises, the performer and the person. Every business decision was made by the Colonel, Larry Geller said. Elvis was going to make a radical change. He was going to get rid of the Memphis Mafia and go to Hawaii. He wanted to get healthy and end his association with the Colonel. But the health issues were always there. He had hypertension, a spastic colon, and a bad throat. His nightst and was like a drugstore. He was taking pills every day, and no one was coordinating his medical care, Geller explained. One night in 1977, Elvis was very ill. The Colonel demanded to see him, even though Elvis needed rest. Elvis told me he needed new blood, new people around him. He wanted to read, meditate, and start a charity. But the Mafia members were jealous and couldn't understand his new direction. Despite the challenges, Elvis's impact on those around him was profound. Norman Taurog, the director, was a positive influence. I learned a lot from him. He loved Elvis and Elvis loved him, Michael Hoey said. Elvis gave him a Cadillac, even though Taurog was blind by then. I got televisions and belt buckles, but it was all part of the experience. The Colonel, however, was a different story. The first time I met him, he was trying to impress me. He told me about his deal-making tactics, but I didn't like him, Hoey recalled. Elvis was more than just a performer. He was a complex person with a deep desire to change his life, but the world and the people around him made it difficult. Elvis Presley's film career was a mix of ups and downs. Hal Wallis, a famous producer, didn't see Elvis's movies as just fun projects for a retired star. Instead, Wallis saw them as a way to make money, so he could fund more serious films. For Wallis, making an Elvis movie was like making a John Wayne movie, or a highbrow film like Beckett. But despite the money, Wallis didn't think Elvis's movies were in the same league as those other films. Elvis himself fit into the Hollywood scene in his own way. Some people thought he was trying to become a serious actor, like Marlon Brando or James Dean. But Elvis didn't want to be a major movie star. He just wanted to be a good actor. However, the man behind Elvis's career, Colonel Tom Parker, had a different view. For Parker, Elvis was a product to be sold, not a serious artist. Parker didn't care much about the movies themselves. He was more interested in the merchandise and promotion. Elvis's relationship with Parker was complex. Elvis didn't let Parker control his personal life, but Parker's influence was still strong. For example, they never left the country because Parker didn't have a passport. They only went to Hawaii, and even then, the film Fun in Acapulco was shot on a Hollywood set. Despite the challenges, Elvis made a positive impression on some of his co-stars. Susanna Lee, who starred with Elvis in Paradise Hawaiian Style, had a great time working with him. She was an Elvis fan since childhood, and when Hal Wallis offered her a role in the film, it felt like a dream come true. The film's production was so enjoyable that it was extended, and everyone had a blast. However, the presence of Colonel Parker often made things less fun. Lee remembered Parker as rude, and said that Elvis even had him removed from the set once. Elvis's shy nature made him different from other stars. He didn't abuse his power, and he was kind to his co-stars. For example, when Susanna Lee needed to change, Elvis told the director he would be late on set so she could take her time. This kind of gesture made a big impression on Lee, who said that even though she had made many films, people always remembered the one with Elvis. Elvis's happiness with his films was a different story. His hairdresser, Larry Geller, recalled that Elvis was often unhappy with the movies he made. Elvis felt they were teeny bopper movies with no real meaning. He wanted to do something more significant and return to performing live, where he felt the energy was. Elvis's friend George Klein confirmed that Elvis was often dissatisfied with his films. He liked only about 10 out of the 31 he made. Klein said Elvis didn't like the repetitive scripts and songs in the later films. Elvis wanted to change things, but he often felt stuck. Even when Elvis was at his most popular, he had a deeper desire to be taken seriously as an actor. He once told Geller that his greatest regret was that the world didn't know he was an actor. He wanted to be remembered for more than just his music. Despite the challenges, Elvis had a few bright spots in his film career. Michael Hoey, who worked with Elvis on Tickle Me, found him to be a good-humored and likable person, though he was initially shy. Hoey saw Elvis grow as an actor over time and came to respect him more. Elvis's work with songwriters like Don Robertson also highlighted his talent. Robertson wrote several hit songs for Elvis, including Anything That's Part of You and I'm Counting on You. Robertson and Elvis first met in 1961, and their professional relationship quickly blossomed. Elvis was always interested in the songs and lyrics, and he sought to understand the inspiration behind them. Robertson even performed his songs for Elvis, and they had a similar voice quality, which made it easy for Elvis to interpret his work. However, not everyone had a positive experience with Elvis. Sonny West, a member of the Memphis Mafia, had a rocky relationship with the star. Elvis could be temperamental, and even violent at times. West remembered instances where Elvis hit him, and their friendship eventually ended due to Elvis's bad temper. Elvis's film career was a reflection of his complex personality. He was a star who wanted more, but he was often held back by the expectations of his fans and the control of his manager. Despite the challenges, Elvis left a lasting impression on the people he worked with and the films he made. The tension in the room was thick as he picked up a soft drink bottle and started walking towards me with it. His face was twisted with anger, and he growled, "You're going to tell me or I'll break your head open with this." I froze for a moment, but then something inside me snapped. I stood my ground and said, "You're not going to touch me with any bottle or anything else. You've changed so much. I don't want to be around you. I quit." He dropped the bottle and replied, "You can't quit, you're fired." I held my ground and said, "I'm out of here." He lunged at me and hit me in the jaw. Tears welled up in my eyes, and I said, "I never thought you could do something like that." Gene tried to smooth things over, saying, "Elvis never should have hit you." Elvis later apologized, which was the only time he ever said sorry to anyone. He admired that I had stood up to him. Drugs, I believed, were the root of all the later problems. Elvis got jealous when Kathy, his girlfriend, started seeing other men. I knew it was only a matter of time before I would be fired. Before he got sick, he warned us we would have to look for other jobs if we didn't stop saying things, I said. But he meant more to us than the jobs, so we didn't stop. That's why we wrote the book. We couldn't get to him anymore. We had to smack him down, I explained. Someone at a show asked me why I wrote the book. I said I did it to save Elvis's life because we had no more access to him. He said, "You didn't have to write that book." I said we had to smack him down to hit him right in the face. He went places where he had security, and we couldn't get to him. Elvis's private detective, John O'Grady, called me and offered money not to write the book. I refused. It wasn't about the money, I said. We were being bought off, and we wouldn't accomplish what we wanted to do. The book was a message to Elvis. I had discussed his drug use with John before. Elvis was on Demerol Percodan, and when I reminded John about this, he cut me off because Elvis was in the room. He was taking cough syrup, sleeping pills, and Valium. We would literally fall asleep while talking. Elvis fell asleep in his food. I once took in a parcel for my 6-month-old son, which contained Demerol from a dentist named Max Shapiro. I called Shapiro and threatened to get him arrested if he ever did that again. Despite this, Shapiro married in Elvis's home in 1977 and got Percodan for Dean Martin. Dr. Nick, Elvis's doctor, denied he had anything to do with Elvis's drug intake. In 1980, the Tennessee Board of Medical Examiners brought charges against him, claiming he overprescribed drugs to people, including Elvis, After a month-long trial, he was acquitted. Elvis took pills for certain situations. Dr. Nick said, if he had a strep throat, he would take what was necessary. He had blood pressure and diabetes. He wasn't taking off the street drugs. He hated drugs. But did he take too many prescription drugs? Not from me, Dr. Nick said. He got pills from other doctors. I controlled his pills. I never left him with pills. A nurse had pills in a little brown envelope, but he never had pills in his hand. Dr. Nick and the Colonel, Elvis's manager, often disagreed. Elvis could get pills from loads of doctors. The Colonel thought I was one of the ones who wanted to make money from Elvis, Dr. Nick said. Larry Geller, Elvis's hairdresser, said the Colonel once shook his cane at him when Geller suggested Elvis was too sick to perform and needed hospitalization. Elvis's plans to retire and move to Hawaii were just wishful thinking. Everyone around him knew time was running out. Dr. Nick told me he knew in his heart what was about to happen. 5 days before the tour, I gave him a complete physical and found nothing wrong with him. And weeks before, he passed a multi-million-dollar health insurance. Dr. Nick said, but sometimes even doctors can be wrong. Elvis's friends and the mafia were convinced he couldn't go on. His face was bloated, and his girth was unrecognizable. His fans still lined up for tickets, but his inner circle knew better. Most of us have people in our lives who glue us together. He had his mom, Linda Thompson, friends on the inside, but he'd come apart. He'd become tired. His eyes were twinkleless, one mafia member said. Linda Thompson, Elvis's ex-wife, stayed with him during his hospital stays, bringing food from Graceland. She sensed the trouble ahead. Brenda Lee, a fellow musician, saw Elvis in 1975 and warned him he needed to change. Ray Walker of the Jordanaires, Elvis's backup singers, said it was like Elvis was caught in a tsunami. There was a kind of reconciliation with Priscilla, who said Elvis would call her 3 to 7 times a day, talking for 20 minutes each time. On August 16, 1977, the inevitable happened. Nancy Rooks, Elvis's faithful maid, was at Graceland when she realized something was wrong. Elvis wasn't answering calls, and Ginger Alden, his girlfriend, was worried. At 2 a.m., Ginger found Elvis in the bathroom, dead. Nancy called for help, and Joe Esposito, a close friend, rushed upstairs. I could see that he had been reading a book on the toilet. He had fallen face down on the carpet. Esposito said he tried to revive Elvis, but it was too late. Dr. Nick arrived and confirmed Elvis was dead. They took him to the hospital, but it was too late. Priscilla, Elvis's ex-wife, was devastated. Lisa Marie, Elvis's daughter, refused to open her door at first, but when she did, she saw everyone crying and started crying too. It was a sad day that no one would ever forget. Dr. Nick and Joe Esposito were haunted by the events of that night. Dr. Nick said, I knew he was dead, but I held onto the hope that he might still be alive. Esposito said, when I turned him over, I knew he had been dead for a while. Marion Koch, Elvis's personal nurse, was called to the emergency room. She saw Elvis lying there, blue, and asked the doctors to stop working on him. He was obviously dead, she said. It was a nightmare, and she felt like someone had pulled the rug from under her. She talked to Vernon, Elvis's father, and the reality of Elvis's death sank in. The man who had once been the king of rock and roll was gone, leaving behind a legacy that would never be forgotten. The day Elvis was set to leave for his tour in Maine, Lisa Marie was also leaving. I was supposed to join Elvis in Maine, but instead, I found myself at Graceland with news no one ever wanted to hear. When I arrived, the paramedics had already taken Elvis to the hospital, and Dr. Nick was there to break the news to Vernon, Elvis's father. I followed the ambulance, hoping against hope that it was a false alarm. But when I walked into the jungle room, I saw Dr. Nick telling Vernon that Elvis had passed away. Vernon was devastated, and the room became a chaos of emotion. I was in shock and couldn't process what was happening. I thought the ambulance was for Vernon, but it was Elvis. Dr. Nick was crying, and I asked him what had happened, but he didn't know. He was overwhelmed, just like the rest of us. He quickly set about securing Graceland, making sure everything was under control. I had to find Lisa Marie. I went to her grandmother's room and found her on the phone with Linda, her aunt. Lisa Marie was only 9 years old, but she had the presence of mind to call Linda and tell her what had happened. Linda didn't believe her at first, but when I took the phone, she began to cry. I had to explain that it was true, and it was a moment that none of us would ever forget. The news spread quickly, and soon the media and fans started gathering outside Graceland. Buddy Chapman, the Graceland police director, had to manage the crowds. It was a cold, rainy night, and the atmosphere was heavy with grief. People were climbing trees just to get a better view, and some even stayed in the trees for days, determined to pay their respects. Priscilla, Elvis's ex-wife, and other family members arrived, and the plans for the funeral began. Vernon decided on a white limousine and an open casket service, so that fans could say goodbye. The funeral was a massive event, with thousands of people lining the route to the cemetery. The Blackwood brothers and J.D. Sumner and the Imperials sang, and the air was thick with emotion. Elvis's cousin, Charlene Presley, described the scene as surreal. She saw people in trees, some who had camped out for days just to be there. The Lanskys, who had made many of Elvis's iconic outfits, created a new suit for him to be buried in. It was a final act of love and respect. But the day after the funeral, there was another shock. The police warned that there was a plan to steal Elvis's body from the mausoleum. The plan was foiled and the suspects were arrested, but it convinced the city that Elvis's body needed to be in a secure place. So his body was moved to Graceland, where he remains today. The death of Elvis had a profound effect on everyone who knew him. The Memphis Mafia, his close circle of friends and bodyguards, were left to find new paths. Sam Thompson went to law school and became a lawyer. Joe Esposito inventoried Elvis's belongings, and eventually moved on to work with other stars. Jerry Schilling became a road manager for Billy Joel, and Larry Geller continued to work in the music industry. Elvis's legacy lived on. He had always wondered if he would be remembered, but he became an icon, a symbol of the American dream. People like Azalea Smith-Moore, who knew him from his early days in Tupelo, still think of him fondly. She believed he had returned to his faith in the weeks before his death. For many, Elvis never really left. Ray Walker said, "I've never felt him gone. He has an everlasting existence in the memory of anyone who met him." Joe Esposito believed that Elvis would have turned his life around if he had more time. Jimmy Angel, a singer who modeled himself after Elvis, credited him with breaking down barriers in the music industry. Sonny West was devastated by Elvis's death, feeling like the sun had gone out of his life. Elvis's impact on the world of music and culture is immeasurable. He opened doors for countless artists, and remains a beloved figure to this day. The memories of those who knew him continue to keep his spirit alive. Elvis Presley, the man who changed the face of popular music and entertainment, left a lasting legacy that continues to inspire and captivate fans around the world. His journey from a poor boy in Tupelo, Mississippi, to the king of rock and roll is a testament to his talent, charisma, and the impact he had on the music industry and popular culture. Elvis's rise to fame began in the 1950s when he signed with Sun Records and released his first hit, That's All Right. His unique blend of country, blues, and rock and roll, along with his electrifying stage presence, quickly made him a sensation. He took the world by storm with hits like Heartbreak Hotel, Hound Dog, and Jailhouse Rock, and his performances on television shows like The Ed Sullivan Show brought his music to millions. Beyond music, Elvis also made a mark in Hollywood, starring in over 30 films. While his acting career had its ups and downs, his musical performances in movies like Blue Hawaii and Viva Las Vegas are still celebrated today. His influence extended beyond entertainment, as he became a cultural icon, symbolizing the rebellious spirit of the 1950s and 1960s. Elvis's personal life was as complex as his public persona. He married Priscilla Beaulieu in 1967, and they had a daughter, Lisa Marie. Despite their love, the pressures of fame and personal issues led to their divorce in 1973. Throughout his career, Elvis surrounded himself with a tight-knit group of friends and associates known as the Memphis Mafia, who supported him through the highs and lows. However, the intense demands of fame and a series of personal struggles took a toll on Elvis. In the 1970s, his health began to decline, and he struggled with weight issues and drug addiction. Despite these challenges, he continued to perform and remained a beloved figure to his fans. Tragically, Elvis passed away on August 16, 1977, at the age of 42, leaving behind a legacy that has endured for decades. Elvis's home, Graceland in Memphis, Tennessee, has become a shrine for fans, drawing visitors from all over the world. It stands as a testament to his life and the impact he had on music and culture. The stories of the people who knew him, from his family to his closest friends, add depth and richness to his legacy, painting a picture of a man who was not just a superstar, but a human being with dreams, fears, and a deep love for his craft. Elvis Presley's influence continues to be felt in the music industry and beyond. His music remains timeless, and his spirit lives on in the hearts of those who remember him. The king may be gone, but his legacy will forever be a part of the fabric of popular culture.